The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and disappointment. Mahogany shelves sagged under the weight of legal tomes no one had touched in decades. A brass clock ticked too loudly, each second dragging nails down the back of my neck. We sat in a stiff circle, me, my mother, my sister Natalie, and a scattering of relatives who couldn't resist circling like vultures for scraps of inheritance. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. His voice was flat, clinical, but the words landed like gunshots. As part of the execution of this will, Daniel Whitmore requested a DNA test be performed, specifically on his daughter, Emily Whitmore. Emily. That was me. The room stilled. My stomach clenched like someone had poured ice into it. The last time I heard my father's voice, it had been bitter, sharp. And now, even in death, he'd found one more way to remind me I never belonged. I felt their stares. Natalie's lips curled into a half smirk, half pity. My mother stiffened, her manicured fingers digging crescents into the leather of her clutch. The cousins exchanged looks, eyes glimmering with hunger for scandal. I wanted to disappear, to peel off my skin and vanish before anyone could see the humiliation etched across my face. Instead, I sat frozen, every muscle locked. My name is Emily Whitmore. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? Like you were the error, the stain, the one they tolerated but never embraced? That was me. My father had spent my entire life holding me at arm's length. Every missed soccer game, every stiff birthday card with no handwritten note, every comparison to Natalie, the perfect one, were just little rehearsals for this final performance, and here it was. His last act, a demand for proof. The nurse leaned forward with a sterile swab. My mouth was desert dry. As the cotton brushed the inside of my cheek, shame burned hot, rising like bile across the table. Natalie leaned back in her chair, twirling a strand of blonde hair around her finger, looking every bit the golden child she always was. She tilted her head, lips parting just enough to whisper, "Guess we'll finally know, huh?" The smirk she wore wasn't subtle. It was sharp. The kind of smirk that said you're about to lose everything, and I'll be here to watch. I forced myself to look back at her, forcing a smile I didn't feel. My jaw ached with the effort. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that betrayal has a strange rhythm. It never lands where you expect it. It bends. It circles. It finds its way back. The swab slid into its sterile tube with a snap. The lawyer nodded, moving on with the reading of the will, but my ears rang too loud to hear. All I could think about was that one simple, devastating fact. My father wanted the world to know he doubted me, not Natalie. Not anyone else. Just me. But what I couldn't imagine then, what none of us could imagine, was that this test wouldn't ruin me. It would ruin them. The meeting ended. Chairs scraped against the hardwood as people shuffled out, buzzing with whispers. I stayed rooted to the spot, hands gripping the arms of my chair so tightly my nails left half-moon dents in the leather. Natalie brushed past me, perfume cloying and sweet. She leaned in just enough for only me to hear, "This is gonna be fun." I didn't answer, because I was too busy replaying the lawyer's words. My father's voice threw him. A DNA test. One final chance to carve me out of the family tree, but betrayal doesn't always know whose neck the blade will cut, and soon we'd all learn that truth. 3 weeks later, the results came. The envelope was thick, clinical, stamped with the seal of finality. The lawyer laid it on the table like a bomb. No one breathed. The only sound was the soft tick of that brass clock, marking the seconds before someone's world ended. He opened it slowly, unfolding the paper with the reverence of a priest unveiling a sacred text. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Then he read, "Emily Whitmore is biologically confirmed as the child of Daniel Whitmore." The air rushed out of my lungs so fast I nearly choked on it. Relief washed over me, thick, dizzying, but it was tangled with something else, vindication. For once in my life, I wasn't the outsider. I was the blood. But before I could even process it, the lawyer's voice sliced again. "However, Natalie Whitmore is not biologically related to Mr. Whitmore." The room imploded. Natalie shot up so fast her chair toppled backward, the crash echoing like a gunshot. Her face twisted, cracked, her perfect composure shattering in real time. "That's a lie," she snapped, her voice shrill, desperate. "Read it again. You've made a mistake." The lawyer adjusted his glasses, steady as stone. "The results have been triple verified. Natalie, is not Mr. Whitmore's biological child. The words hung heavy, choking the air. My mother gasped, a sound I'd never heard from her before. Her hand clutched at her pearls, as if strangling herself with them might keep the truth from spilling out. Around us, cousins and aunts exchanged wide-eyed glances. The vultures leaned forward, drunk on scandal. Natalie's chest rose and fell in panicked jerks. You don't know what you're talking about. My father, her voice cracked. He loved me. Loved her. Idolized her. Elevated her above me in every way possible, and yet, here we were. I sat frozen in my chair, but inside, something shifted. For years, I had been the one who didn't belong. The one who was never enough. And now, in one brutal sentence, the crown was ripped from Natalie's head and crushed underfoot. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt something colder. Heavier. Like stepping into a room and realizing all the walls were mirrors. Reflecting secrets you didn't ask to see, because if Natalie wasn't his, that meant one thing. Mom. I turned my head slowly toward her. Her eyes were downcast, but I saw it, the flicker. The shadow. The fear, the kind of fear only a guilty woman carries. She smoothed her skirt with trembling hands, avoiding my gaze, but she couldn't hide it. Not from me. Natalie's voice cracked into sobs, a sound more pitiful than I'd ever imagined her making. She slammed her fists against the table. This isn't real. It can't be real. But it was. The lawyer cleared his throat again, his voice awkward against the storm unraveling in front of him. If you need time to process, we can continue later. But no one heard him. I stared at my mother. And I knew this wasn't just about Natalie's paternity. This was about the web of lies my mother had woven for 34 years. Lies she let my father choke on until the day he died. Lies she used to pit us against each other. Lies that turned me into the scapegoat and Natalie into the saint. And now, the mask was slipping. I leaned back in my chair, the taste of iron on my tongue, and whispered to myself. Not me. Them. Because this test hadn't been a curse. It was the beginning of their undoing. The news spread faster than wildfire. I couldn't go anywhere without feeling the burn of stares. At the grocery store, I felt whispers brush my back like nettles. At the coffee shop, conversation stalled the second I walked in. Did you hear? Emily's the real one. No way, Natalie's not even Daniel's kid. 34 years, can you imagine? Their voices were hushed, but their eyes weren't. They gawked openly, like I was both victim and spectacle. For so long, I'd been the shadow. The afterthought. The girl they whispered about as troubled or difficult. And now, overnight, I was the center of a storm that wasn't even of my making, but it wasn't validation that filled me. It was something sharper. Darker. Natalie, the golden child, had always been untouchable. Dad's pride. Mom's masterpiece. The living embodiment of everything I wasn't. And now? She was the fraud. The irony was almost poetic, but the truth doesn't stop at irony. It digs deeper. And I needed to know how far down this went. So I asked Mom. It was late, after the vultures had gone home, after Natalie had locked herself in her room like a wounded queen retreating from her kingdom. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the rain tapping against the kitchen window. Mom stood at the sink, washing dishes she didn't need to wash, scrubbing the same plate over and over. Like she could scrub away the last 3 decades. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. My voice was steady, sharper than I intended. Who's her father? The plate slipped from her hands and clattered against the sink. She didn't turn around. Her shoulders stiffened, a statue frozen in guilt. For a long moment, she said nothing. Just the rhythm of her shallow breathing. Then, in a voice so soft I almost missed it, she whispered, a surgeon. In Paris. We met before I married your father. The words struck like lightning. A foreign city, a man with healing hands, a secret affair woven into the foundation of our family. I staggered back, gripping the doorframe. 34 years. 34 years of living with this lie, feeding it, protecting it, while I was starved of love. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her until the pearls snapped off her neck and scattered across the floor. But instead, I laughed. A bitter, broken sound that didn't feel like it came from me. All those years, I whispered, my throat tight. You made me the problem. You made me feel like I didn't belong. And the whole time, I couldn't finish. The truth was too jagged to swallow. She finally turned to face me, her eyes glassy. Emily, you don't understand. No, I snapped, cutting her off. I understand perfectly. Because in that moment, everything crystallized that I wasn't hated because I wasn't his. I was hated because Natalie wasn't. Mom had spent decades covering her tracks, overcompensating, building Natalie up into the perfect daughter to keep suspicion off herself. And the easiest way to do that? Make me the scapegoat. It all made sense now. Every cruel comparison. Every cold shoulder. Every time Dad's affection was siphoned toward Natalie while I was left out in the cold. It wasn't me. It was her, the lie, the surgeon in Paris, the 34-year secret that had finally clawed its way to the surface. I stared at my mother, this woman who had orchestrated my misery, and I felt something shift deep inside me, not relief, not rage, purpose, because secrets don't stay buried forever. And I was done being the graveyard that kept hers hidden. The knock at my apartment door wasn't polite. It was sharp, violent, the kind of knock that doesn't ask, it demands. When I opened it, Natalie shoved her way inside like a storm. Her mascara was smeared in black streaks, her perfect blowout ruined by humidity, strands of blonde hair clinging to her damp face. She looked feral. You think this makes you better than me? She hissed, her voice ragged. She didn't wait for an answer. She marched into my kitchen, slamming her bag on the counter so hard the sound echoed. I shut the door slowly, my pulse steady. I had expected this. The golden child didn't fall quietly. Natalie spun on me, her eyes bloodshot, her hands trembling with rage. You've been jealous your whole life. And now, what? You think you've won? You think because some stupid test says you're his, that suddenly you matter? Her voice cracked on the last word, and she caught herself on the counter like the weight of it all was crushing her. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her unravel. No, Natalie, I said softly. The test didn't make me matter. It just showed the truth. Something you can't run from anymore. She laughed, harsh, jagged, the sound of glass breaking. The truth? You wouldn't know the truth if it slapped you in the face. Dad loved me. He adored me. He gave me everything because you weren't worth the dirt under his shoes. Her hand slapped the counter, rattling the wine glasses in the rack. Too bad he's dead, Emily. Too bad your big moment came too late. The man you've been begging for love from your whole life? He's in the ground. And you get nothing. The venom in her words should have pierced me. But instead, I just studied her, her wild eyes, her trembling hands, the cracks spreading across her perfect porcelain mask. She was terrified. For once in her life, Natalie wasn't the adored daughter. She was the fraud. I stepped closer, my voice steady, low. Leave. Her head snapped up. What did you say? Leave my apartment, I repeated, locking my gaze on hers. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows who your real father is. The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. You wouldn't dare, she whispered finally. I tilted my head, letting the silence stretch until it suffocated the air between us. Try me. For a moment, I thought she might strike me. Her fists clenched at her sides, her chest heaving, her whole body shaking with rage she didn't know where to put, but then she grabbed her bag and stormed out, slamming the door behind her so hard the frame rattled. I stood in the stillness that followed. My heart strangely calm. For years, Natalie had been untouchable. She wore the crown, basked in the spotlight, thrived on the pedestal our parents built for her. And I was left in the shadows, bruised and invisible. But now, the pedestal was gone. The crown was slipping. And she knew it. What she didn't know, what she couldn't even begin to fathom, was that this was only the beginning, because revenge isn't a single strike. It's a slow burn. A series of cuts, each one deeper than the last, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the weak one. I was the fire. Revenge doesn't come as a lightning strike. It comes as smoke, seeping into every crack until the whole house burns. I started small. At first, it was whispers. A dropped word here, a pointed silence there. I didn't need to scream the truth from rooftops. This town already had its ears perked, desperate for scandal. All I had to do was feed it. Natalie's coworkers. It must be hard for her, knowing she isn't really a Whitmore. To her alumni board, well, technically those scholarships are in the name of a man who isn't her father. To her closest friends, the ones who thrived on gossip, I heard her mother had a whole life in Paris no one talks about. The effect was immediate. The same people who used to orbit her like she was the sun began drifting away. They didn't want to be caught in the eclipse. Natalie fought, of course. She plastered on her perfect smile, posted filtered photos of brunches with friends who were already halfway out the door, and pretended nothing had changed. But I could see it, the cracked spiderwebbing beneath her facade, and while she scrambled to hold her image together, I dug deeper. I went to the attic of my father's estate. A place I'd avoided since I was a child. The air was thick with dust and secrets. Boxes sagged under the weight of forgotten years. And there, buried beneath yellowed tax returns and brittle newspaper clippings, I found them, letters. Dozens of them. They were folded neatly, tied with ribbon, the paper softened by time. The handwriting was elegant, slanted, unmistakably European, French. I couldn't read every word, but the meaning was clear enough. Mon amour. Toujours à toi. Love poured onto paper, promises inked across oceans. Natalie wasn't an accident. She wasn't the result of a drunken mistake or a fleeting fling. She was a choice. A child born from passion, not duty, and that choice had ruined me. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor, my fingers trembling as I unfolded each letter. The words blurred through my tears. Rage and grief tangled in my chest until I could barely breathe. My father had suspected. He must have known, even if he never said it aloud. Why else demand a DNA test in his will? Why else look at me with suspicion, while lavishing love on a child who wasn't his? The irony was unbearable. For 34 years, I had been punished, not because I didn't belong, but because Natalie didn't. The laughter that burst from my throat was sharp, bitter. It didn't sound like me. It sounded like something broken and dangerous. I gathered the letters. Scanned them. And then, with steady hands, I sent them to the Whitmore Estate Board, who oversaw the trust funds Natalie had dipped into for years. To the extended family, the ones who worshipped Natalie at every reunion. To the church my mother clung to, her shield of piety. The fallout was immediate. Nuclear. Natalie's phone must have rung all night. I imagined her scrolling through texts of pity laced with poison, voicemails dripping with curiosity and judgment, and my mother, oh, my mother. She had built her reputation on pearls and pressed blouses, on Sunday services and perfectly arranged dinner parties. Now? She was a fraud. A liar. The woman who carried another man's child while playing the part of dutiful wife. I had been the black sheep my whole life. But as the smoke spread, I realized something. I wasn't the outcast anymore. I was the one holding the match. The second reading of the will felt different. The air in the lawyer's office was thicker. Heavier, like everyone knew the worst was coming but couldn't look away. My mother sat stiff as marble, her pearls absent this time. Her face was bare, her mask of elegance stripped away. Natalie slouched in the corner, sunglasses shielding her swollen eyes, her silence louder than any tantrum she could throw. And me? I sat in the center, calm, steady, bracing for the final cut. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, flipped to the last page, and cleared his throat. To my daughter, Emily Whitmore, I leave the family estate, house, land, and all attached assets, on one condition: she must protect its legacy. The words hit like thunder. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Natalie's sunglasses flew off, clattering to the floor. What? That's mine. He promised me, he said I'd always be his little girl. Her voice cracked into a sob, and she buried her face in her hands. The perfect Natalie, broken into pieces in front of the same relatives who once worshipped her. Mom didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, frozen, her lips pressed into a bloodless line. Because she knew my father had suspected all along. The lawyer continued, his tone clinical, detached. Mrs. Whitmore is to receive nothing. In accordance with Daniel Whitmore's wishes. Nothing. The word sliced through the air. For 34 years, my mother had built her life on lies. Raising another man's child in my father's house, spending his money. Soaking up the admiration of a town that thought she was flawless. And now, in one sentence, it was all stripped away. She turned her head toward me, finally meeting my eyes. Her expression was unreadable, a storm of rage, grief, and something else, fear, because she had lost everything. And I had gained it all. The relatives erupted into whispers, the sound of vultures circling fresh prey. Emily gets the house? All of it? Well, she is the real daughter. I barely heard them. My ears buzzed, my chest heavy with the weight of my father's final move. Had he known? Had he suspected the truth for years and waited until death to play his hand? As the lawyer wrapped up, my mother rose on shaky legs. She didn't look at Natalie. She didn't look at anyone. She just gathered her purse and walked out, each step echoing like a retreat. Natalie stayed seated, crumbling in silence. I stayed too. Because I needed a moment. When the room finally emptied, I walked the halls of that office alone, my footsteps echoing in the sterile silence. And later that night, I walked the halls of the estate. The Whitmore house was massive, old, lined with portraits of ancestors staring down from gilded frames. My footsteps echoed across the marble floors. For years, I'd walked these halls as a visitor, tolerated but never welcomed. Now, every creak of the floorboards belonged to me, and yet, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like inheriting a tomb. The walls whispered with ghosts, with the weight of secrets. My father's study smelled faintly of cigars and dust, the desk still scattered with papers. Like he might walk in at any moment and sit back down, but he wouldn't. Instead, he had left me with a house full of memories I didn't want, a legacy I didn't understand. And the crushing knowledge that he had doubted me until his last breath, and still, he had chosen me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the outcast. I was the heir. But revenge doesn't always taste sweet. Sometimes it's bitter. Sometimes it's quiet, like a lock clicking into place. And as I stood there, holding the keys to everything they'd tried to take from me, I realized something chilling. The real revenge wasn't what I'd taken from them. It was what they had lost all on their own. It started slowly. First, Natalie stopped posting her perfect photos. The curated brunches, the charity galas, the staged smiles with friends, all gone. Her Instagram, once a glossy magazine of her life, went dark. Then came the whispers. She had been dropped from her alumni board. A sponsorship she bragged about had quietly dissolved. Friends who once clung to her like moths to a flame avoided her calls. Her world didn't collapse in a dramatic explosion. It decayed, rotted from the inside out, and I watched every second of it. I'd see her in town sometimes, shopping alone, sunglasses on even when the sky was gray. Her hair, always so carefully styled, looked limp. Her voice, once confident and cutting, trembled at the edges when she ordered coffee. Natalie Whitmore, the golden daughter, was unraveling, but it wasn't enough. The night she finally came to the estate, the storm outside seemed almost cinematic. Thunder rolling as if the heavens themselves wanted to witness what was about to unfold. I opened the door to find her standing there, soaked, mascara streaking down her face. She wasn't wearing designer anymore. Just jeans and a sweater, plain, desperate. Emily. Her voice cracked on my name, like it tasted strange in her mouth. Please. I don't have anywhere else to go. For a moment, I said nothing. The rain pounded the roof, wind howling against the shutters. She looked small, fragile in a way I never thought possible. Natalie. The girl who once laughed as I was treated like an outsider. The sister who wore her superiority like a crown. The daughter who basked in love that was never truly hers, and now she was on my doorstep, begging. Mom won't answer my calls, she continued, her voice trembling. Her friends won't even look at me. Everyone knows, Emily. Everyone. And I can't take it. She reached for me then, her fingers cold and shaking, clutching my arm like I was her last anchor. Please. Just let me stay. Just for a little while. I should have slammed the door. I should have told her to rot in the mess she'd helped create. But something inside me hesitated. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was the ghost of the sister I'd once hoped to have. Or maybe it was something darker, because revenge isn't just about destruction. Sometimes it's about letting them live with the ruins. I stepped aside. Come in. Her relief was immediate, a shuddering sob as she crossed the threshold. She collapsed onto the couch, dripping rainwater onto the antique upholstery my mother once guarded like treasure. She looked around, her eyes wide. It feels so strange. Being here. Without Dad. Without, she stopped herself, the word dying in her throat. Without your father. Not hers. Silence stretched between us. Heavy and suffocating. Finally, she whispered. I don't know who I am anymore. Her words hung in the air. Raw, stripped of her usual armor, and for the first time, I saw her not as the golden daughter, not as the rival who overshadowed me, But as a hollowed-out girl carrying the weight of lies she didn't ask to be born into, but sympathy is dangerous. It dulls the blade. So I leaned forward, my voice low, steady, unshaken. You're nothing more than what you always feared, Natalie. A stranger in this house. In this family. In this name. Her face crumpled, tears streaming unchecked. She didn't fight back. She didn't argue. She just wept, and as I watched her break apart, I realized my revenge was complete, not because I had destroyed her, but because she had destroyed herself. The estate was quiet that morning. Too quiet. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, gilding the dust in golden beams. The house smelled of old wood and lavender polish, the scent of my childhood and my father's rules. But the silence was different now, no footsteps, no whispered judgments, no shadows of Natalie's laughter. Just me. Natalie had left before dawn. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't have to. I watched her car crawl down the driveway, taillights flickering like fading embers. And I knew she was gone, not just from this house, but from the pedestal she once stood on. I thought I'd feel triumph. Instead, I felt peace, because revenge, I'd learned, isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's letting the truth breathe. Sometimes it's stepping out of the shadows and realizing you never needed their approval to exist. I wandered the halls of the estate, running my fingers along the carved banisters. The portraits of Whitmores who had stared down at me with silent judgment for decades. For so long, I believed I was unworthy of their gaze, but now? Now they were mine. I paused in front of my father's study. The room smelled faintly of him, cigar smoke and oak. The desk was still cluttered with papers, an unfinished life frozen in time. I sat in his chair. For years, I wasn't even allowed to touch it. Natalie was the one he invited into this sacred space. Natalie, the imposter, but it was me who sat here now. On the desk was the will, neatly folded, as though daring me to read it one last time. And beside it, a photograph, me and him, at age 10. My smile was shy, uncertain. His hand rested on my shoulder, firm but distant. He hadn't been perfect. He had doubted me. He had punished me for the wrong person's sins. But in the end, he had left me the keys to everything, and that meant something. I took a deep breath, then opened the window. The air outside was cool, crisp, carrying the scent of wet earth after last night's storm. The town stretched out in the distance, still whispering, still watching. Let them, they could gossip all they wanted, trade stories like currency. None of it mattered anymore. Because they weren't the ones holding the legacy. For years, I had been painted as the shadow, the mistake, the one who didn't belong. But the truth had flipped that story upside down. Natalie wasn't the heir. My mother wasn't the saint, and me? I wasn't the outcast. I was the survivor. I pressed my palm against the window frame, the sunlight warming my skin, and let the silence wash over me. Natalie was gone. My mother was disgraced. The lies had burned to ash, and I was still here. I smiled, not the bitter smile I'd worn in the attic, not the sharp smile of revenge, but something softer. A smile that belonged to me, because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just breathing freely in a house that was never meant to be yours, realizing it always was, and for the first time in my life, I felt it. Wholeness. The story wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, Emily Whitmore. Daughter. Heir. Survivor. And with that truth settled in my bones, I whispered the only word that mattered.